What if I told you there was a gaze capable of transforming despair into hope? What if, in the midst of pain and loneliness, someone were whispering words of comfort so profound they touch your very soul? Have you ever experienced this? Stay with me until the end, because what you're about to discover may surprise you and may also kindle a light within your heart. Today I want to invite you to enter with me into the mystery of Mary's merciful gaze, a gaze that welcomes, that sees beyond masks, and that speaks directly to broken hearts. Medjugorje has gone down in history as a place of apparitions, prophecies, and messages that defy our rational understanding. But there's something beyond the well-known accounts and revealed messages that circulate between the lines. Whispers for those living in tribulation, guidance for those seeking emotional healing and spiritual protection. It's not just history, it's an intimate experience. When we speak of the merciful gaze, we're not talking about theory, we're talking about presence. An invitation to conversion of heart, healing for wounds we sometimes can't even name. Do you feel this? If so, know that you're not alone. Throughout this video, we will explore 7 unspoken messages that emerge from this maternal gaze, messages that don't require scholarship to understand, and which serve as practical steps for those who wish to rediscover hope. Some speak of prayer and fasting as delicate weapons against despair. Others speak of reconciliation and the importance of caring for one another. All converge on the same core. Mary wants to restore, protect, and send. These messages from Mary are not just distant warnings. They are compasses for those walking in dark nights, small lights that guide the way. Imagine for a moment a broken heart receiving a gaze that doesn't judge, that doesn't demand perfection, just presence. Think about the feeling of being seen and loved exactly as you are. This is where the promises of healing and personal mission emerge. Here, we won't sell magic solutions. We'll offer reflections anchored in faith, testimonies, and spiritual practices that many report experiencing, simple prayers, gestures of forgiveness, a discipline of fasting that opens the spirit. All of this, when guided by a merciful gaze, transforms suffering into something purposeful. You may be wondering, but do these messages really have power in my daily life? The answer, as we'll see together, is yes, but the power lies not in mystical words alone, but in the inner transformation these words provoke when they are sincerely received. Stay with me until the end, because, step by step, we'll unravel each of the 7 messages, understand how they touch the reality of modern tribulations, and discover practical signs of spiritual protection that can be perceived in everyday life. Along the way, I'll share real stories and examples, offer biblical reflections that connect with the messages, and propose small, practical challenges so you can test these truths in your own life. This isn't an abstract theory. It's an invitation to experience. What you'll discover now may surprise you, and more than that, it may spark renewed hope within you. If your heart is weary, if your soul seeks signs of care, prepare to be touched, because the merciful gaze doesn't pass you by. And now, without concluding this mystery, let's begin to unravel the first of these messages and experience together what it means to you. If this topic resonates with you, leave a comment below with what touched you most: a word, a memory, a pain that found solace. I want to read every story. Your experience can spark hope in someone else going through the same desert. When you share, it's not just a comment, it's a gesture of care that spreads Mary's message, reaching hearts that may have nowhere to lean on right now. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more people with this type of content, allowing us to bring more testimonies, more reflections, and guided prayers that truly help those who suffer. If you're touched by this merciful gaze, like the videoites, a simple way to say I believe and strengthen this healing community. And if you want to follow each new message, each testimony, and each practical step we'll present, subscribe to the channel. When more people join, more light reaches those who need it most. I don't do this for numbers, I do it because each subscriber means another voice for hope, a hand extended to those who haven't yet found solace. Stay with me. Continue on this journey. In the next few minutes, we'll delve into the first of Medjugorje's 7 unrevealed messages. The one that begins with the simplest and most profound gesture, the welcoming gaze that doesn't condemn, but restores. Now, let's understand together what this message truly means for your heart. I single quotes Mathos, the creator of this space, and someone who, in recent years, has dedicated himself to listening attentively to stories, testimonies, and glimpses of faith coming from places like Medjugorje. I don't present myself here with diplomas to impress, but with a journey of study and respect for those who have lived real experience at interviews, readings, and prayers that have allowed me to understand how certain messages touch those who suffer in a practical and transformative way. Let's explore the 7 unrevealed messages of Medjugorje and how they touch those who suffer. What you'll hear isn't distant theory, but rather clues to transformation applicable to your mindset, your decisions, and the impact your choices have on your spiritual and emotional journey. As I delved deeper into these accounts, I realized something I think is essential to share. Many of the hidden truths are not secrets out of malice, but because they require a heart ready to receive them. True revelation doesn't consist of spectacular information, it consists of shifting our way of seeing, of changing our mindset to realize that healing often begins with something simpler, welcoming look, a reconciling word, a gesture that invites change. The messages we'll uncover have this rhythm. They don't promise shortcuts, but invite decisions that generate transformation. And that's why the approach here is direct, curious, and practical. I want you to leave this video not only touched, but with actionable steps to take. There's one point that always strikes me in the Medjugorje narratives: the balance between intimacy and mission. The merciful gaze first rebuilds, then, as a natural consequence, it sends forth. In other words, the experience of being seen and healed changes one's disposition to act in the world. This is vital to understanding that the impact of these messages. They aren't passive messages of consolation. They are seeds of purpose. I like to think of them as small revelations that act as turning points in our journey. Imagine a person who, after receiving consolation, decides to change their prayer routine. This change affects their decisions, improves their relationships, and gradually transforms their It's a chain reaction. Interiority generates attitude. Attitude generates impact. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. When I talk about emotional healing, I'm not just talking about a feeling of temporary relief. I'm talking about a process that changes how you respond to the past and how you face the future. Many people confuse spirituality with escapism. The messages we'll see emphasize just the opposite. Healing requires courage to face the hidden truth within us: soon resolved memories, thought patterns that insist on imprisoning us, repeated decisions that keep us in a cycle of pain. The proposal is clear: change our mindset so that new decisions become possible. And this has a very practical dimension: small spiritual disciplines and intentional daily prayer. A moment of controlled fasting, a gesture of reconciliation function as exercises that reshape the brain and heart, like training that prepares us to live a different reality. It's also important to talk about community. Experiencing a profound transformation within yourself without sharing the journey can stagnate the process. The messages we study always return to the theme of mutual care, not as moralism, but as a healing strategy. When someone finds us in pain and extends a hand with a merciful gaze, it accelerates recovery. This community care is not secondary, it's part of the plan. Therefore, the integration of personal experience and community action creates a virtuous cycle. You are healed, and then help others find their way. By helping, your healing is reaffirmed and deepened. Along this journey, we will also discuss signs, not merely spectacular ones, but everyday signs of spiritual protection, that sense of inexplicable peace, coincidences that guide us, opportunities for forgiveness that arise at the right time. Learning to recognize these signs is learning to read the language of mystery in our practical lives. And here comes a methodological invitation. Observe your own routine. Record small experiences. Notice when a prayer brought clarity before an important decision. This kind of spiritual journal is a simple and powerful tool for mapping transformation. I don't want to sound simplistic by saying all of this is easy. Changing decisions, reconfiguring mindsets, and facing hidden truths requires discipline and, often, pain. But it's not impossible either. The messages we're about to unravel carry a tone of firm compassion. They don't promise an effortless path, but rather like to walk through the struggle. And this difference makes all the difference, because knowing we're not alone in our struggle changes the way we approach each step. There are also reports of people who, by adopting small spiritual habits, have experienced concrete changes in their emotional health, family relationships, and even professional decisions, which reminds us that the spiritual and everyday are deeply intertwined. Throughout the video, I'll alternate between explanations, testimonies, and practical exercises you can apply today. I'll offer biblical reflections that connect with the messages, avoiding technical language and favoring a frank conversational tone. I want you to feel that we're facing something intimate and, at the same time, far-reaching, a truth that touches the depths of the soul and has the power to produce revelations, mindset adjustments, and concrete transformations. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, and as we move on, let's carefully examine the first unrevealed message: the welcoming that precedes all healing, the gaze that restores before sending. Comment below. I'm on this journey too. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Medjugorje wasn't born from a distant theological concept, but from human encounters. Young, vulnerable people, surprised by something that eluded immediate explanation. In 1981, in a village unknown to many, accounts emerged that seemed too simple for the complexity they would later carry. Ordinary people claimed to have seen a maternal presence and heard messages that spoke directly to their hearts. These accounts unleashed a wave of curiosity, hope, and also skepticism, because when the sacred erupts into everyday life, it always provokes difficult questions. What sets Medjugorje apart from other religious events is precisely this blend of intimacy and impact. On the one hand, deeply personal experiences of consolation and transformation. On the other, a collective movement, pilgrimages, widespread testimonies, and a global interest that transformed that small town into a meeting point for those seeking signs of spiritual protection and guidance. To understand the impact of Medjugorje, it's necessary to look at history with balance, recognizing both the personal experiences that touched lives and the institutional issues that arose around them. Many who have visited or studied the phenomenon report a tangible effect on their personal journey: healings, reconciliations, mindset shifts, and decisions that redirected careers and families. Others have raised legitimate questions about interpretation, the authenticity of certain messages, and the timing of some revelations. This tension between faith and investigation is part of the background of any event that promises a hidden truth. The community seeks signs, and institutions seek criteria. Between these poles lies the real movement of transformation that interests those who are suffering. Because it's not just about proving or disproving, but about identifying what responds to human pain in a practical and effective way. What's worth emphasizing, clearly and respectfully, is that Medjugorje has emerged, over the decades, as a space of conversion for many. Conversion here doesn't just mean a change in ritual or affiliation. It means a profound shift in thinking and feeling, a transformation that affects mindsets, daily decisions, and the way relationships are conducted. By hearing the messages calling for care, prayer, and reconciliation, people were led to reevaluate priorities, invest in broken relationships, and place faith as a vector for action, not just consolation. This tangible impact is one of the elements that makes the messages so relevant to those in distress. They speak of paths that, when followed, produce measurable results in emotional and community life. It is also necessary to recognize the different types of interlocutors who surround Medjugorje. There are pilgrims who come seeking immediate solace. There are scholars who research accounts, dates, and contexts. There are pastors and religious leaders who ponder theological implications. There are those who, out of their own pain, seek signs of hope and find nothing in academic discourses. This diversity explains why the messages resonate in different ways. For some, they are an invitation to spiritual action. For others, a catalyst for inner transformation that manifests in practical decisions. In both cases, a pattern emerges. The merciful gaze that appears in the narratives always precedes a movement: first welcome, then mission, and this sequence has a exponential effect on people's lives. When we talk about historical context, it's also important to consider the temporal dimension of the messages. Many of them were given at specific moments, but their content spans time because they address enduring human issues: pain, loss, guilt, hope. This is why, even decades later, they continue to produce revelations and reverberations in the lives of those who hear them. The message doesn't expire because it's not an announcement conditioned on a single historical event. It's an invitation to change mindsets, adjust habits, and make meaningful decisions. This timelessness makes the messages a kind of practical guide for those experiencing affliction. Furthermore, there is a pedagogical element in the Medjugorje narratives worth highlighting. The messages often use simple, accessible images and speak of concrete practices: prayer, fasting, reconciliation, caring for others, rather than abstract concepts. This direct language is what allows people from different backgrounds to apply the recommendations in their daily lives and observe the impact. The pedagogy here is experimental, testing small spiritual disciplines, observing results, adjusting behaviors. It's an approach that respects the pace of each individual's journey, without easy promises, but with concrete proposals for transformation. As we delve into the accounts, we also find behind-the-scenes stories that help us understand why there is a certain delay or reserve in the dissemination of complete messages. Not all words are relevant to a broad audience. Some seem intended for prepared hearts, for people in specific processes of conversion. This idea of secrecy is not a power play, but a spiritual safeguard. Some revelations require maturity to be internalized without causing confusion. And here another essential dimension emerges: the responsibility of discernment and invitation for each person, upon encountering a message, to evaluate how it touches their own hidden truth, without relying exclusively on external opinions. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this topic. As we delve deeper, we'll see that the historical value of Medjugorje lies not only in the events, but in how they shape real decisions, choices of forgiveness that rebuild families, commitments to prayer that change routines, shifts in mindset that free us from the past. These transformations generate an impact that extends beyond the individual, reaching communities and reshaping environments. It is at this intersection between personal experience and collective strength that the messages find their power. Comment: this makes sense to me. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. There is something intrinsically human in the idea of withholding words until the time is right. And when we speak of the unrevealed messages of Medjugorje, this emerges as a principle that blends spiritual prudence and prophetic timing. It's not about creating mystery for its own sake, It's about recognizing that some truths, because of their intensity or scope, require prepared hearts, communities that have undergone a process of transformation, and leaders who can contextualize what was said. In many accounts, the words that were withheld were not enigmatic out of whim, but out of caution. Like a healer who doesn't apply harsh medicine to a still fragile patient, mystery requires discernment. This dynamic of withholding reveals something profound about the nature of revelations. They are not always intended for the general public. Some are directed at specific moments in the journey of faith. Moments when the recipient's mindset has already been worked through prayer, repentance, and experience. When we think of prophetic timing, it's easy to fall into a fantasy of glamorous predictions, but the issue is more practical and pastoral. Prophecy that instructs action needs to find hearts capable of transforming instruction into decision. Prophecy, in this sense, serves as a catalyst, not a substitute for human choice. Therefore, many preparatory messages act as an internal training, an education in spiritual sensitivity. They prepare people to recognize signs, to respond responsibly, and to make a commitment that generates real impact. Hidden truth, then, is not a conspiratorial secret. It is a spiritual prudence that recognizes human limitations and the risk of misunderstanding. When certain words are released prematurely, there is also a communal aspect to this logic of secrecy. Certain messages only make sense within a relational and congregational context. Messages that touch on the need for reconciliation, for example, require an environment in which people are willing to hold each other accountable. Without this, any well-intentioned guidance can be lost in isolated interpretations. Therefore, in several historical accounts from behind the scenes, we see that leaders, pastors, and witnesses engage in the process of discernment before more sensitive words are widely disseminated. This institutional care is not empty bureaucracy. It is a protective mechanism so that revelation can act effectively, generating transformation in decisions and daily practices. Another important point is the pedagogy of small revelations. Not every message needs to be grand to be effective. Sometimes the most powerful revelations are those that arrive in doses and at strategic moments, building a journey of conversion step by step. Think of it as an educational process, a sequence of stimuli that change mindsets, fine-tuning the heart, and enabling courageous decisions to be made. Transformation, therefore, is progressive. Preparatory messages act as spiritual exercises that, when practiced, reveal visible fruits, changes in relationships, new prayer habits, attitudes of forgiveness. This is a model of sustainable impact, less strobe light and more beacons guiding the journey. It's also worth emphasizing that the criterion of a ready heart isn't exclusively moral or emotional. It's also spiritual maturity, which involves knowledge, practice, and responsibility. Receiving a revelation implies a capacity for integration, not just feeling a momentary spiritual warmth, but translating that experience into life-changing decisions. Therefore, messages that remain on hold often require preparation, fasting, prolonged prayer, community accompaniment, and often time for the effects of what was said to consolidate in the person's life. It's a sometimes painful process because transforming mindsets and habits is never comfortable. It requires abandoning comfort zones and facing hidden truths that can challenge identities and long-held projects. Furthermore, there is a dimension of responsibility that permeates this entire scenario, the responsibility of the messengers and the responsibility of the listeners. Messengers, whether visionaries, witnesses, or leaders, are obligated to present their words with clarity and humility, avoiding sensationalism. Listeners, in turn, must exercise discernment, comparing the messages with concrete experiences, and with criteria of faith and prudence. This dialogue between transmission and reception is part of the behind-the-scenes story that makes the phenomenon more credible for those experiencing it, as it demonstrates that it is not an isolated or manipulable occurrence, but a flow of revelations embedded in complex human processes. When we look at the preserved messages, we also perceive a prophetic dimension that speaks to collective time. Some words serve as preparations for larger events or movements, others as specific guidance for personal crises. In both cases, the logic is similar. Revelation acts as a partial map, showing possible routes and calling for decisions that anticipate or mitigate consequences. The preserved word, then, acts as a strategic alert, promoting reorientations that can prevent greater damage. It is a practical vision of the propheticless spectacle. More strategy. This combination of prudence, progressive teaching, and community responsibility helps explain why some messages only arrive when the inner journey has already reached a certain level of maturity. Revelation, in this sense, respects human freedom. It does not impose, but offers. It does not replace decision-making, but rather enables wiser decisions to be made. And it is precisely this dynamic that gives unrevealed messages a preparatory quality. They are like tools waiting for the right moment to be placed in the hands of those capable of using them wisely. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic. As we delve deeper, we'll better understand how to distinguish between superficial curiosity and genuine acceptance, between seeking signs and a willingness to transform. We'll explore how these preparatory messages shape concrete attitudes, how they influence daily decisions, and how, little by little, they produce an impact that reverberates through relationships and the community. Comment: this makes sense to me. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. When we speak of the first message, the mercy that welcomes, we are entering a reality that cannot be explained solely with theological words. It is a sensory and moral experience that touches the flesh of suffering. Imagine a broken heart, shattered by losses, by betrayals, by mistakes that insist on being remembered in the wee hours of the morning. Now imagine this heart being seen by a gaze that doesn't accuse, that doesn't demand justification, that simply remains. This image may seem simple, almost obvious, but its power is devastating. Being looked upon with compassion shifts the axis of suffering. The mercy you welcome doesn't promise to erase scars instantly. It creates a space where the scar can be examined without shame, a safe environment for healing, slow, concrete, and dignified. To begin, in accounts of this welcome is often described as a gaze that sees beyond social masks, that perceives what lies beneath defenses. For those living in affliction, this description is liberating because, for the first time, suffering no longer needs to be explained or defended. It is recognized as human and loved. There is a practical dimension to this message. Welcome instills trust, and trust opens doors to transformative decisions. When someone feels welcomed, they begin to accept guidance, to allow small changes in routine, to consider fasting and prayer not as empty rituals, but as instruments of inner reconfiguration. In other words, the merciful gaze acts as a catalyst that alters mindsets and habits. And this is where the visible impact on lives begins. To illustrate, I recall a story I heard in interviews. A woman carrying guilt over a broken relationship described the moment when, in a place of prayer, she simply felt looked at with tenderness. She didn't receive a condemning word. She received a silent invitation to forgiveness and self-acceptance. From that moment on, small decisions changed. She began setting aside 10 minutes a day for a prayer of acknowledgement, sought forgiveness from those she had hurt, and accepted therapeutic help. Nothing happened immediately, but over time, her self-perception shifted, her relationships were rebuilt, and the impact extended to the emotional health of her children. This is the kind of transformation the messages describe, not spectacular miracles, but solid, lasting changes that reconfigure lives. Scripture echoes this when it speaks of divine care for the wounded and vulnerable. A brief verse reminds us that the Lord is close to the brokenhearted, and there is an explicit invitation for the weary to seek rest. This reference is not a theological flourish. It points to the same dynamic we perceive in Medjugorje. The presence that welcomes is the first step toward restoration. And more than citing a passage, what matters is recognizing how this promise operates in practice. Welcome instills courage to face hidden truths, and this courage enables decisions that trigger change. There's also a psychological aspect worth mentioning. When acceptance is received, the brain releases physiological responses that facilitate recovery. It reduces the adrenaline rush of fear, increases the sense of security, and opens space for emotional repair processes. This helps explain why the impact is not only spiritual, but also physical and relational. Transformation, therefore, is not just a pretty word. It's a process that involves body, mind, and spirit. And in the narratives we studied, it's precisely the combination of these levels that makes the messages useful in everyday life. They aren't restricted to abstract discourse. They arrive as a practice that guides concrete decisions. Another relevant dimension is the community attitude that a merciful gaze inspires. Welcoming is not an isolated act of piety. It is an invitation for the community to learn to see others through the eyes of compassion. When a group begins to practice this perspective, a network is created where people help each other face the hidden truth of their wounds. The consequence is a ripple effect. Individuals who experience welcome become agents of welcome, and then the transformation goes beyond the personal level and reaches the social fabric. It's an impact that permeates homes, schools, and workplaces. Changes in attitude that, combined, bring about substantial changes in the environment. It's important, however, not to romanticize the process. The mercy that welcomes encounters resistance in ourselves and in others. There's pride, fear of change, old grudges that act as barriers. Therefore, the message doesn't arrive magically. It requires decision. This connects directly with the idea of mindset. To be converted by welcoming, one must choose a different stance toward suffering. This choice requires intention and repetition, practicing a new form of prayer, seeking reconciliation where there was previously silence, letting go of narratives that keep one's identity trapped in error. This type of decision is often painful, because it implies a review of identity and the abandonment of secondary gains that, paradoxical as it may seem, maintain the cycle of pain. At the same time, The revelations that describe this embrace suggest practical exercises that facilitate entry into this new mindset. Small rituals of presence, a concrete gesture of forgiveness, a meditative reading routine that helps thoughts. These are modest practices, but when sustained, they produce change. Think of them as spiritual training. Just as an athlete trains daily to improve results, emotional transformation also requires discipline. This is the true practical secret. Consistency in the small things that, over time, generate a real and tangible impact. Returning to the image of the heart being covered by a gaze. There is something profoundly restorative about this scene. The gaze doesn't fix everything, but rather authorizes reconstruction. It validates the pain as worthy of attention and gives permission for healing to begin. And from this authorization, decisions that previously seemed impossible, asking for forgiveness, accepting forgiveness, abandoning a self-destructive habit, become possible. The message of mercy that welcomes, then, is at once a comfort and a call to action. It consoles and gently pushes us toward the path of transformation. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this topic. And, moving forward, we'll see how this embrace unfolds into concrete practices that anyone can experience today, without empty mysticism, just with simple steps that promote true change. Write it down. I'm on this journey too. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. When mercy transforms into a call to conversion of heart, we leave the realm of immediate consolation and enter the arena of decisions that truly reshape lives. Conversion here is not an abstract concept. It's about reconfiguring your mindset, exchanging narratives that limit you, and making concrete choices that, over time, bring about transformation. It's not about spiritual spectacles. It's about strategic change, routine adjustments, and a commitment to the inner journey that also impacts the outer. This change requires courage, because it involves facing the hidden truth that we often prefer to sweep under the rug. The conversion the message points to begins with a humble and simple gesture: sincere prayer. When I speak of sincere prayer, I mean an unvarnished conversation, opening your heart and saying exactly what hurts, without trying to sugarcoat reality. Try this. Sit in silence for 5 minutes and quietly say what decisions hold you back the most. It may seem elementary, but this gesture is already a first act of freedom, because naming is the first step toward transformation. Next comes active repentance, which is not self-deprecation, but taking responsibility and choosing to make amends when possible. These two movements, prayer and repentance, that generates action, are the practical foundation of conversion. To make this actionable, I propose a simple and straightforward 3-day method. On day 1, write down on a sheet of paper the main decision you need to make, something concrete. Forgive someone, apologize, break a habit that's eroding your peace. On day 2, set aside 10 minutes for a prayer of recognition and take a small action related to that decision. A short message, a phone call, a gesture of humility. On day 3, record in writing what changed, how you felt, what resistance arose, if there was any external reaction. This exercise is short, but it establishes a pattern of fidelity that fuels transformation. Conversion isn't proven by a moment of emotion, but by a sequence of repeated decisions. The spiritual authority that accompanies this proposal is not authoritarian. It is pedagogical. Masters and testimonies throughout tradition emphasize that mature faith manifests itself in concrete habits. This is why messages linked to Medjugorje often guide simple practices: prayer, moderate fasting, reconciliation, because they are instruments capable of safely reshaping one's mindset. The company of spiritual guides or a trusted community is also part of the behind the scenes of this journey. Those who walk accompanied tend to maintain focus and better discern between a fleeting feeling and a true calling. A key point is recognizing and confronting internal patterns that sustain suffering. Often, we don't know exactly what needs to change because certain attitudes have become routine and are hidden behind justifications. The practice of guided self-reflection helps bring these hidden truths to light. At the end of each day of the mini-challenge, write down recurring reactions, automatic thoughts, and situations that triggered anger or fear. This record serves as a map of the emotional backstage and reveals where to focus subsequent decisions. Without this perspective, changing habits becomes a blind attempt. With it, choices become strategic and more effective. Deciding to convert your heart also requires reorganizing your environment. It's not enough to work on your inner self if the context continues to fuel the same dynamics. It may be necessary to cut back on content that generates anxiety, temporarily distance yourself from relationships that encourage guilt, or create routines that encourage silence and uplifting reading. This reorganization of your personal ecosystem is part of the practical transformation. By aligning your environment and discipline, new decisions gain support and begin to produce concrete results in your relationships, emotional health, and even professional choices. Another powerful practice is reparative repentance, asking for forgiveness concretely. Writing a letter, even if it's not sent, or speaking in person to someone who was hurt are liberating gestures. Many transformation narratives linked to faith experiences report that this type of act was a turning point. Taking responsibility lifts the burden of ruminating guilt and opens space for reconstruction. It's not about erasing the past, but about allowing the past to stop dictating the future. When I speak of impact, I refer to the ripple effect that a coherent decision can generate. Changing mindsets alters choices. Choices change habits. Habits transform relationships. This is the logic of lasting transformation. And the internal revelations that emerge in the process, new insights into vocation, priorities that emerge with clarity, sensitivities to serve as compasses that guide larger decisions. It's not a spectacle, it's practical guidance. A calmer, more orderly mind perceives opportunities and signs more clearly. It's important to remember that conversion is a long journey, with ups and downs. Consistency in the small things is what builds change. Tools like a progress journal help measure impact. Record daily an emotion that changed, a decision made, and a sign of impact observed. This way, you create concrete evidence of transformation and can adjust your path more wisely. Behind the scenes of this journey, there are doubts and revelations that mature faith and shape the courage for progressive decisions. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because it is at this point of practical commitment that the message reveals its power. When a person makes the decision to make small changes and repeats this pattern, the consequences extend beyond the individual and touch the community. Conversion of the heart, then, is not a privatization of faith. It is the seed of a change that infects relationships and environments, producing a real and measurable impact. Therefore, by making a concrete decision today and supporting it with prayer and practice, you are entering a chain of transformations that can reshape your journey. Comment: I'm on this journey too. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Healing past wounds is a theme that serves as the backbone of any true transformation process. Because without it, the decisions we make ruminate on the same old pains and rarely produce lasting impact. Old wounds, humiliations, losses, traumas, and family grievances often remain as hidden narratives that guide automatic behaviors. The message that comes from a merciful gaze invites us to bring these hidden truths to light, not for emotional entertainment, but for a concrete process of restoration. Healing is not forgetting. It is rewriting the meaning of what happened so that your story is no longer governed by it. When I think of emotional healing, I think of a kind of re-education, of sensitivity. The mindset that previously interpreted every gesture as a threat begins to learn a different interpretation. It's like adjusting an instrument. Small, repeated tunings make it possible to play different melodies. This requires continuous decisions and simple practices that make up a healing routine. It's not a magic trick, and that's precisely why many people confuse healing with spectacular surprise. True healing is more like small, daily adjustments than a grand explosion of change. It's progressive, patient, and, surprisingly, powerful. I want to tell you a story I encountered in interviews. It's simple, believable, and perhaps similar to something you're familiar with. A young woman named Anna, not her real name, based on true stories, grew up carrying the pain of childhood abandonment. For years, she lived with expectations of rejection in every relationship, which led to defensive behavior and withdrawal that confirmed, for her, her own prophecy of abandonment. On a discreet pilgrimage, amidst a prayer experience, she described feeling a gaze that required no justification, a welcome without questions that gradually dismantled her certainty that she was disposable. The transformation wasn't instantaneous. Anna began setting aside time daily for a simple ritual, for minutes of silence reflecting on a painful memory, followed by a prayer for integrity, and then a reparative act, such as writing an unsent letter or calling someone she'd broken up with. Over the course of months, these small decisions changed her automatic emotional response. Relationships flourished again, and her work received new life because the energy-draining internal burden lessened. This testimony illustrates the principle. Healing practices, decisions, and repeated decisions change habits and, ultimately, destiny. There's a practical, almost physiological dimension to the story of healing. When the internal environment calms, the body responds. Constant states of alert are reduced, breathing becomes regulated, and the emotional space opens to new perceptions. This isn't just spiritual jargon. It's a discovery confirmed by those who have experienced the changes. The message of Medjugorje, in this regard, doesn't simply propose spiritual exercises detached from life. It points to practices that affect the body and mind and, consequently, relationships. Transformation occurs on several levels: cognitive change in mindset, emotional processing, pain, behavioral new decisions, and relational rebuilding bonds. When these levels begin to interact, the impact is real and measurable. Another important aspect is the role of forgiveness, both the request and the granting. Forgiveness is not synonymous with minimizing the damage, but with not allowing the wound to continue to control your life. Many messages speak of reconciliation as a tool for freedom, repairing where possible, and, when not, giving one's heart permission to release the burden. This gesture requires courage and maturity. It is a decision that alters routines and, when repeated, changes mindsets. Active forgiveness is often accompanied by concrete reparations, a sincere request, a gesture of restitution, a practical action that signals change. These are actions that rebuild trust and bring about transformation. The healing journey isn't just about solitude. There are community-based approaches that matter. Adequate support, whether in the form of counseling, prayer groups, or therapy, creates a safe environment for vulnerability to emerge without being exploited. The merciful message always seems to point to the network. No one is meant to carry all the weight alone. At the same time, the community needs to learn to look with discernment, to welcome without paternalism, to listen without rushing, and to propose practices without substituting personal responsibility. It's a delicate balance between support and autonomy, and when we get it right, healing accelerates. There are also very practical practices that the messages implicitly suggest and that function as tools for transformation. For example, establishing short, recurring rituals, meditatively reading a sacred text for 5 minutes, writing a daily paragraph about an event that caused pain, and listing a small reparative action creates a training system for the heart. These small, repeated routines shape larger decisions. Another practice is keeping a signed journal, recording coincidences, moments of unexpected peace, and small decisions that brought relief. This record isn't superstition. It's a method for recognizing patterns and validating progress. Concrete evidence helps transform faith into habits. That when speaking of hidden truth, it must be said that healing also requires confrontation, recognizing how certain, intimate accounts and narratives have shaped our identity. Sometimes, what holds us back is a story we've told ourselves since childhood. Changing this narrative requires listening honestly and rewriting with compassion. It means observing where blame has been misplaced, where shame has taken root, and where old decisions have been repeated as if they were immutable laws. The merciful message invites us to look at these internal structures and choose a different logic, one of dignity, reintegration, and purpose. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because it's precisely at the interface between the pain we face and the small, everyday decisions that healing takes on concrete, visible forms. And as we continue, we'll explore practical exercises you can apply in the coming weeks to trigger this restoration process, step by step, without rushing, with realism, and with faith. Comment below, this makes sense to me. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Speaking of spiritual protection in tribulations is touching on a primordial human need, feeling supported when the ground shakes. Protection here is not a promise of an absence of problems. Life continues to test our endurance, but a guarantee of presence, a sense of care that accompanies us even when we go through long nights. In the messages linked to Medjugorje, this care is described as an attentive presence, a veiling that does not eliminate conflict but provides resources to navigate it with dignity. This nuance makes all the difference because it changes the mindset of what to expect from suffering. No longer punishment or abandonment, but an opportunity for discoveries and decisions that shape the journey. Perceiving this protection in everyday life requires subtlety. It's not always dramatic. It often comes in small signs that, taken together, create a pattern of support. It could be an unexpected calm in the heart when faced with bad news, a providential encounter with someone who offers the right words, or a sequence of coincidences that opens a way out where there seemed to be no solution. These small revelations serve as indicators that care is at work. For those experiencing tribulation, learning to observe these signs is a practical exercise in discernment. Instead of seeking only extraordinary explanations, we begin to map how providence manifests itself in everyday details and how it influences our practical decisions. There's a very practical dimension to this perception. Routines that increase our spiritual sensitivity, intentional silence, meditative reading, moments of gratitude, and recording providential events create fertile ground for recognizing protection. When we keep a signed journal, for example, it becomes easier to see patterns, and concrete evidence transforms a vague sensation into verifiable reality. This practice has a direct impact on inner transformation. It shifts the mindset from someone who feels victimized to someone who perceives resources, possibilities, and signs that guide choices. The journey ceases to be merely a space for survival. It becomes a territory where conscious decisions begin to produce real results. Beyond the perceptual aspect, there is a communal dimension to protection. In many accounts, spiritual care does not arrive in isolation. It manifests through other people: a neighbor who helps, a community that prays, a leader who offers support. Protection, then, has a human face that articulates with the divine dimension. This reality breaks the idea that spirituality is merely interiority. It demands communion and reciprocal responsibility. When the community learns to look with compassion and act with prudence, tribulations lose some of their destructive power. Protection manifests as a network. It does not eliminate risk, but it lessens its impact and facilitates decisions that promote survival and healing. It's also important to understand that protection and discernment go hand in hand. At times, an apparent sign may be the result of desire or misguided protection. Sometimes we interpret coincidences as reassurances when what we need is a radical change in attitude. Therefore, the messages don't just speak of signs, they speak of criteria for interpreting them. Discernment requires calm, consultation with trusted people, prayer, and, often, patience. This prudent approach avoids hasty decisions motivated by fear or a desire for immediate comfort. Wisdom lies in transforming signs into indicators, and indicators into well-evaluated choices, supported by a mindset that prioritizes coherence between faith and action. When trials are intense, protection can appear in the form of inner resilience, a strength that allows us to continue despite exhaustion. In stories we've heard, people describe a preserving energy that gave them the courage to fulfill simple duties amidst the chaos. Caring for children, keeping a job, praying 10 minutes a day. These small acts of fidelity are, in practice, life-sustaining pillars. The message is clear. Protection doesn't exempt us from performing tasks. On the contrary, it strengthens us to accomplish what is necessary. Transformation happens in repeated decisions, in small actions that, though insignificant in the eyes of the world, add up and produce a tangible impact. There is also a symbolic language that appears in the accounts and deserves attention. Images of candles that never go out, of paths that open up, of a calm presence in the midst of a hurricane. These images need not be treated as spectacular phenomena. They function as metaphors that help structure the inner experience. Interpreting them reasonably is a mature exercise. We do not deny the symbol, but translate it into concrete practices, moments of silence, prayer, charitable action, which are the means by which protection operates. The hidden truth of these images is pedagogical. They invite an active stance, a mind trained to recognize invisible resources, and a community organized to respond with care. Psychology also has something to say about spiritual protection. Sense of security reduces chronic alertness, improves decision-making, and facilitates healing processes. Therefore, investing in practices that increase a sense of care, regular sleep, clear boundaries, emotional support is part of the plan. This leads us to understand that protection is holistic. It involves spirit, body, and relationships. When we care for our bodies, respect emotional boundaries, and seek community support, we make our internal environment less hospitable to fear and more fertile for revelations and discoveries that guide our decisions. The behind-the-scenes nature of this protection often involves discreet processes, silent prayers from people we've never even met, anonymous offers of help that arrive in difficult moments, conversations that change course. These gestures, though seemingly small, are part of a larger movement of care that operates behind the scenes of life. Recognizing and being grateful for them fosters an attitude of humility and gratitude, which in turn opens space for new blessings. The cumulative impact of these gestures is profound and measurable. Restored relationships, sound decisions, reduced stress, and a renewed sense of purpose. There is also a prophetic dimension to protection, practical instructions that arrive as subtle guidance. Go this way, wait a bit, trust this person, in which, when received with discernment, prevent greater evils. Prophecy, understood pastorally, functions as strategic advice. It is not a substitute for human will, but a guide that transforms decisions. Such guidance must be received with humility and tested by community and spiritual criteria, lest it become reckless shortcuts. It is in this relationship between listening and deciding that protection reveals its most mature character. It enables responsible choices. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic. As we move forward, we'll identify specific signs and simple practices you can start observing and implementing today to clearly perceive the care surrounding you. Small routines that shift mindsets, concrete decisions that strengthen the journey, and community attitudes that multiply the impact. Write it down. I'm on this journey too. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. When the message points to prayer and fasting as spiritual weapons, it isn't proposing empty rituals or magic formulas. It's indicating practical tools that shape mindsets, sharpen perceptions, and strengthen decisions in times of crisis. Calling these practices weapons may sound strong at first glance, but the metaphor is useful. Weapons aren't meant to destroy indiscriminately. They are tools that offer protection, focus, and discipline in a combat scenario. Likewise, prayer and fasting, properly understood, serve as means of inner transformation that alter how we react to suffering and how we interpret the hidden truth that often guides our behavior patterns. Prayer, in this tradition, appears as a conversation that reconfigures. It's not decorative rhetoric. It's an exercise that readjusts priorities and creates a mental environment conducive to revelation. When we engage in sincere dialogue, acknowledging fears and needs without masks, we begin to clarify paths that previously seemed nebulous. The regular practice of prayer creates a routine of listening, a space where spiritual intuition finds ground and where decisions are grounded. This doesn't eliminate pain, but it promotes a shift in attitude. Instead of reacting impulsively, we begin to respond prudently, guided by a trained sensitivity. In practical terms, prayer works like a gym for the heart. The more frequent and honest it is, the easier it becomes to recognize signals, discern between anxiety and intuition, and choose actions that have real impact. Fasting, in turn, operates on a complementary and visceral level. I'm not talking here about extreme or performative fasting. I'm talking about moderate, accessible practices that help discipline the body and, consequently, the mind. Fasting reduces noise, diminishes automatic impulses, and creates space for more conscious decisions. From a physiological perspective, short periods of fasting can improve mental clarity and reduce emotional reactivity. This makes it easier for a person to listen more attentively to internal and external revelations. In a practical sense, a fast can be as simple as abstaining from a meal or reducing social media consumption for a day, replacing that time with moments of silence and meditative reading. The goal is not punishment, but reorientation, removing from the body and routine that which dulls sensitivity and, thus, opening space for transformation. The combination of prayer and fasting gains strength when supported by routine and intention. Here's a simple, applicable example for those who want to start without fanaticism. In the morning, set aside 10 minutes for centered prayer. It doesn't have to be long. A short 2-minute reading of a sacred or inspirational text is enough, followed by 5 minutes of silence to name fears and desires, and a final 3 minutes of intentional surrender, where you verbalize, even if only mentally, a practical decision for the day. At noon, take a 3-minute pause for conscious breathing and repeat a short phrase that helps maintain attitude. A statement like "Guide me with clarity." In the evening, dedicate 5 minutes to a quick check-in. Note a moment when you noticed calm or direction, and a small step that will change the next day. Add to this a light fast once a week. It could be just skipping a meal and dedicating that time to spiritual reading or serving others. This simple, repeated routine works as a discipline that changes habits and, over time, transforms mindset and decisions. It's important to emphasize that these practices must be accompanied by discernment. Fasting is not recommended for everyone. In the same way, people with health issues, for example, must adapt. And prayer is no substitute for professional emotional support when there is clinical trauma. The message we hear in the Medjugorje narratives always points to balance and responsibility. There is no room for extremism that confuses spirituality with self-harm. Prudence is part of the behind-the-scenes of this journey. Consulting trusted leaders, sharing intentions in community, and adjusting practices according to one's own condition are mature attitudes that increase impact and prevent harm. Furthermore, prayer and fasting have a communal dimension that amplifies their effect. Praying in a group, or fasting with shared intention, creates a synergy of purpose that often accelerates revelations and opens doors to mutual support. There are reports of small communities, by establishing rhythms of prayer and fasting, seeing collective changes, less conflict, more service initiatives, joint decisions that generated social impact. This leads us to understand that these practices are not just individual tools, they reshape environments. By collectively disciplining the body and soul, we produce a field of transformation that goes beyond the individual and reconfigures relationships and structures. The effectiveness of these disciplines is also supported by evidence of cumulative effects. Small, repeated acts build a new internal architecture. The mind becomes accustomed to seeking clarity first before reacting. The heart learns to prefer patience over impulse. Decisions become less reactive and more strategic. At work, with finances, and with family, this shift in attitude translates into better choices, fewer regrets, and a tangible impact on quality of life. This is where the idea of impact comes in. Consistent spiritual practices are not escapism. They are an investment. They yield results in healthier relationships, more aligned professional choices, and a clearer sense of purpose. The revelations linked to these habits, when they arise, almost always arrive disguised as sudden clarity and intuition, and insight. The courage to confront a difficult situation, but it's important to remember that they rarely appear out of nowhere. They are the fruit of a cultivated discipline. Hidden truth becomes visible in a mind trained by silence and detachment. And that's why the message speaks so much about fasting combined with prayer. Together, they reconfigure the body and soul to receive and apply revelations responsibly. Finally, there's something practical and immediate worth emphasizing. Start small, be consistent, and record results. A brief journal with daily observations about how the practice affected your decisions and emotional state helps you measure progress and adjust your discipline. Seeking companions or a mentor is also part of the behind-the-scenes process that increases the likelihood of success. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic. As we continue, we'll unravel real examples of adaptable spiritual routines and see how to adjust them to your reality, so that prayer and fasting cease to be dissonant concepts and become tools for concrete transformation in your life. Comment: I'm on this journey too. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. When we look at the message of unity and care for the community, we realize that the merciful gaze is never content with purely individual consolation. It always points beyond, to a relational dynamic that heals and protects. The community appears in the narratives as a body that sustains itself. When a member is cared for, it is not just the individual who benefits, but the entire social network that surrounds them. This idea may seem obvious, but its depth only becomes apparent when we observe the behind-the-scenes transformations, the small collective decisions, the discrete gestures that, together, generate a real impact. Transformation, in this sense, is a process that permeates mentality and behavior. The way we think about others changes. The decisions that govern our coexistence change. And, with this, the revelations of healing begin to manifest themselves in a more tangible way. There's a hidden truth here that deserves to be spoken. Clearly, we often expect healing to be a one-off event, a dramatic culmination that resolves everything, but community experience shows us that healing is also a sequence of small, repeated actions, a well-timed phone call, a no-questions-asked visit, an act of forgiveness that requires no explanation. These actions are guided by a mindset that chooses to view the other with mercy rather than suspicion, with empathy rather than judgment. And this mindset shift isn't automatic. It's cultivated by habits. Listening more, responding with kindness, prioritizing reconciliation over being right. When the community adopts this pattern, individual decisions gain support, and the journey of recovery becomes shorter and more sustained. I think of stories I've heard, of people who witnessed how a simple collective gesture changed the course of an entire family. In a small town, a family living isolated out of shame found a group in the neighborhood who began bringing meals and offering companionship without asking questions. Gradually, the family regained the courage to go out, to look for work, to rebuild ties. There was no instantaneous cure. There was a process of social and emotional rehabilitation that was only possible because the community made practical decisions about care. This illustrates the power of unity. A merciful gaze doesn't just comfort, it organizes ways for the person to sustain themselves and flourish. The impact, therefore, is not just individual, it is collective and lasting. Unity does not mean unanimity or the absence of conflict. It means a willingness to prioritize reconciliation and practice forgiveness as a discipline. In many Medjugorje accounts, the emphasis is on reconciliation, repairing broken relationships, actively seeking forgiveness, and offering forgiveness as a relational policy. This requires difficult decisions. Admitting error, apologizing, accepting temporary humiliation in favor of healing. These decisions transform the dynamics between people and create an environment where the hidden truth of wounds can come to light without fear of retaliation. It is a process that requires courage and consistency, because relationship cultures are not changed with a single speech, but with repeated practices that reshape the social fabric. Another relevant dimension is the practice of reciprocal care. Caring for others is not just a sporadic act. It means assuming shared responsibility for one another's well-being. In practical terms, this can mean organizing support groups, regularly visiting those who are lonely, or even creating systems of practical assistance such as help with household chores, transportation, food in times of crisis. These concrete actions are the applications of collective compassion. They translate the mercy of the gaze into measures that produce immediate and visible effects. Transformation occurs when the community ceases to be a passive setting and becomes an active agent of healing. It's also important to recognize that unity requires honesty. There's no point in feigning peace while injustices persist. Authentic reconciliation involves truth and acknowledging the harm. Therefore, the community call contains a paradox. Forgiving doesn't mean erasing history. It means integrating it in a way that doesn't determine the future. Making decisions that promote restorative justice, when possible, acts as a healing agent, because it validates pain and creates opportunities for reparation. This logic of shared responsibility is a pillar of community healing. It combines compassion with the courage to act justly. The spiritual dimension of unity also deserves attention. Praying together, fasting with communal intention, supporting initiatives that promote spiritual reconciliation, all of this creates an environment conducive to revelations and signs of presence. When a group adopts an attitude of intentional care, a space opens for guidance and insights to emerge more clearly. In many stories, this collective practice has been the catalyst for transformative decisions. Vocations have awakened. Leadership has been renewed. Families have found paths to forgiveness. The journey ceases to be solitary and becomes a shared mission, where each act of care expands the possibility of restoration. There is also a multiplier effect that we cannot ignore. People healed by the community tend to become agents of healing. An individual who has received support and rebuilt their life through decisions of forgiveness and community practice often begins to look at others with the same merciful eyes. Thus, the transformation spreads in waves, because the attitudes that promote healing replicate naturally. This is the true impact, a movement that perpetuates itself, not by force of techniques, but because the experience of being cared for generates the desire and ability to care. Behind the scenes of this dynamic, it's also necessary to invest in training and leadership that promotes a culture of care. People who guide groups, lead communities, or accompany healing processes need tools for discernment and emotional support. Investing in training, no matter how small, increases the effectiveness of reconciliation efforts and prevents misguided energy consumption. This is part of the unit's practical work, making care sustainable so that it doesn't depend solely on isolated heroic gestures, but on structures that enable continuity. The emotional call here is clear and sincere. Caring for others is a responsibility that transforms both the receiver and the giver. There is a profound spiritual and human gain in adopting this stance. It is part of the journey that leads us to live a faith that is not reduced to feelings, but materialized in concrete decisions and actions. Community experience shows that healing happens when we choose, day after day, to look and act with mercy. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. And, moving forward, we will look at practical examples of how to build this culture of care in small circles, with simple steps that can be adopted today. Write it down. I'm on this journey too. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. When the seventh message presents itself as a promise of hope and personal mission, it closes the cycle of revelations with a call that transforms suffering into purpose and pain into an impulse to act. It's not a quiet conclusion or a magic formula. It's a summons to discover that, even when wounded, we can be sent. This idea shifts mindsets. There's no longer an identity defined by the wound, but rather an identity marked by movement, by the decision to use what has been broken as leverage to serve, as raw material to build something new. It's a shift as practical as it is spiritual, because it alters behaviors, reorients priorities, and generates a real impact on relationships and the environment around us. Think for a moment about what hurt you. Now imagine that this same sensitive spot can become a point of contact capable of reaching others who carry similar pain. The promise of hope arises there, in the conversion of the painful experience into a source of empathy, understanding, and welcoming actions. This is not empty rhetoric. It is a dynamic confirmed by many testimonies. People who have undergone healing processes have reported not only greater inner peace, but also a change in their actions. They began working on social causes, counseling others, dedicating time to initiatives that bring comfort. A personal mission, then, is not necessarily something grandiose. It is often a sequence of small, repeated decisions that together renew families, communities, and destinies. There is a hidden truth in this calling. Suffering, when integrated wisely, reveals resources that were previously hidden. Resilience, empathy, and the capacity for presence, qualities formed in the heat of trial, become tools for service. Transformation, therefore, is not an escape from the past. It is an incorporation of it into one's life project. This incorporation requires conscious decisions, choosing to forgive, choosing to invest time in healing, choosing to teach what has been learned. Each choice is a stepping stone on the path that connects pain to mission, and along this path, revelations emerge that help guide future steps. The message also carries a dimension of responsibility. Being sent is not synonymous with exemption from struggle, but with assuming a purpose. In practical terms, this implies aligning desire and behavior. Those who accept the promise of a personal mission need to translate feelings into concrete actions, perhaps starting by offering a listening ear to someone in crisis, perhaps participating in a support group, perhaps dedicating time to a project that alleviates the suffering of others. These small decisions, repeated faithfully, produce an impact, and the impact feeds back into hope, seeing that a practical attitude helps someone reconfigure their worldview and strengthens the conviction that pain can be meaningful, transformed into a blessing. There is also a contemplative aspect to this promise, a hope that does not deny reality, but invests it with meaning. In many spiritual traditions, personal mission arises from a process of listening and discernment and unveiling of priorities that were hidden under the weight of anguish. Here, the victim mentality is gradually replaced by a servant mentality, which finds in service not only a duty, but a source of fulfillment. This shift is profound because it changes the direction of vital energy. Instead of expending internal resources on self-protection, the person applies their strength to acts of healing and generosity. The effect is twofold. They heal themselves, while contributing to the healing of others. Behind the scenes of this transformation often involves community support and spiritual practices that sustain courage. It's not uncommon for someone, encouraged by a prayer group, a mentor, or a providential encounter, to discover a new calling. These revelations don't appear in isolation. They emerge in context. Therefore, the promise of a personal mission is often accompanied by simple invitations, participating in a solidarity activity, volunteering for community service, initiating conversations that lead to reconciliation. Each of these gestures is a way of testing one's calling and proving that the change has legs to stand in everyday life. It's also worth highlighting that a mission doesn't have to be grand to be transformative. Small initiatives have a ripple effect. One person who decides to welcome a neighbor, who chooses to listen without judgment, who takes the time to counsel a young person at risk, can bring about changes that reverberate for years. The promise of hope, therefore, is not utopia. It is a well-thought-out life strategy. It proposes that we transform pain into a resource, that we use it not to fuel resentment, but to generate practical compassion. It's an invitation to consider the potential impact of each decision. Every word, every gesture, every daily choice can be a vector for change. There's also a legacy dimension to this message. When someone takes on a personal mission born of healing, it produces an effect that transcends their own lives. Bonds are rebuilt. Family habits are reconfigured. Stories once marked by pain begin to carry narratives of hope. This legacy is, ultimately, the impact that gives meaning to the journey. Transformation, in this sense, isn't ephemeral. It's lasting because it rewrites trajectory. And knowing that our choices can have this impact is a powerful motivator. The phrase that sums up this dynamic well is simple and memorable. From the wound, the mission is born. Keeping this line in mind helps anchor a sense of purpose when weariness tries to convince us otherwise. It helps redefine the meaning of suffering, pointing to the possibility that what has marked us can, with time and conscious decisions, become a driving force of service and hope for others. Finally, it's crucial to understand that accepting this calling requires listening and discernment. It's not about hastily transforming pain into action, but about allowing healing, prayer, and community support to reveal the right calling. The process is careful, respects limits, and avoids burnout. It's also bold because it invites us to act in the world with courage. It's a journey that demands repeated decisions, constant adjustments, and fidelity to the small practices that sustain transformation. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this topic. And as we continue, we'll explore concrete examples of how this personal mission can manifest itself in family, community, and professional contexts, and how you can begin today to take the first steps toward this vocation born of healing. Write down, I'm on this journey too. Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic. The practical moment arrives. The moment where theory finds its feet on the ground of everyday life, and that's when transformation begins to become visible. After reviewing the 7 messages from the welcoming gaze to the mission born from the wound, it's essential to translate all of this into concrete decisions that can be tested this week. I don't want to suggest empty recipes. I want to propose simple, intentional, and repeatable steps capable of shifting your mindset, reorganizing your routines, and producing a real impact on your journey. Think of them as spiritual and emotional exercises, short, direct, and designed to generate small victories that accumulate and, over time, reconfigure habits and results. The first action is a discipline of presence. Meditate for 10 minutes a day with the intention of healing. It doesn't have to be a complicated ceremony. Sit in a quiet place, set a timer for 10 minutes, breathe consciously, and bring to the center of your thoughts a wound, a name, a situation that requires restoration. Instead of running away from the pain, name it honestly and then direct an intention. A short phrase like I ask for clarity to understand and courage to act. This time should be spent listening, not just talking. Allow thoughts, images, or small revelations to emerge without forcing them. Then, record, in a few lines, what emerges: an idea, a feeling, an image. This record serves as analytical material behind the scenes of your life, a map of where to focus future decisions. The consistency of 10 minutes a day creates a mental conditioning that decreases reactivity and increases the ability to make decisions more aligned with your faith and purpose. The second action is an act of reparation. Choosing someone to forgive, or ask for forgiveness for doing so concretely. It could be a phone conversation, a sincerely written message, or even an unsent letter if the situation doesn't allow for direct contact. The gesture is the heart of the practice, acknowledging the error, taking responsibility, and, when possible, proposing a step toward reconciliation is a movement that releases emotional energy and reshapes relationships. The decision to forgive or ask for forgiveness is also a practice in humility and courage, shifting the victim mentality to that of a healer. Note your reaction, what you learned, and the practical effect. However small, this tangible evidence is important for strengthening practical faith. The third action is to intentionally serve someone. Help someone this week with a concrete a meal, offering transportation, taking care of a task, listening for 20 minutes without interrupting. When performing this gesture, don't seek recognition. Seek the transformation that arises from caring. Intentional service is a school of personal mission. It highlights that healing is not just for us, but so that, healed, we can heal. Observe the impact. How did your day change? How did your mind and heart react? What decisions emerged after this gesture? This data is essential to understanding the ripple effect that small actions create. To ensure these 3 actions aren't just good intentions, I propose a simple follow-up routine. Write down a line every day about how each action affected you. Even if it's simply "I felt fear, there was silence," or "clarity emerged." After 7 days, review the record as a mini report on your transformation. This measurement practice isn't a cold technique. It's a gesture of self-directed sensitivity that helps distinguish between fleeting emotions and consistent change. In audiovisual work, this moment is perfect for inserting micro-testimonies or captions that validate the accounts. Short excerpts from people who have done similar experiments and felt a difference. In terms of production, use soft, swelling music during hopeful moments. Mute the soundtrack during strong phrases so the words carry the necessary weight. Cut to close-ups of eyes, hands, and candles when the emotion demands emphasis. Maintain a dynamic pace, 12 to 18-second blocks. Work well to avoid viewer distraction and maintain a sense of movement. In addition to these 3 actions, it's helpful to remember practical measures that support the journey: getting adequate sleep, limiting screen time, setting aside quiet time throughout the day, and seeking spiritual or professional companionship when needed. Spiritual protection and physical health go hand in hand. Taking care of the body improves mental clarity and, consequently, the quality of decisions. Behind the scenes of transformation, these simple measures have a significant impact. They reduce noise and increase the capacity to receive small revelations that guide choices. As you apply these steps, allow yourself to have realistic expectations. The immediate transformation we promise here is the possibility of feeling a little calmer, of realizing a clear decision, and of experiencing a gesture of reconciliation. That lifts a burden. The greater impact is cumulative. Repeated choices reconfigure your mindset and open space for deeper revelations. And when hope begins to emerge, it appears not as a spectacle, but as a subtle shift in your natural inclination to serve, forgive, and pray more freely. Use this process to test the messages we've explored. See which ones resonate most with your hidden truth and which require more preparation. On an emotional level, I'd like to close this section with a word of comfort. If you've come this far, with a heavy heart, know that a merciful gaze accompanies your step. It's not a promise of eliminating pain, but a guarantee of meaning and companionship. There's a time for healing for each person, and what we propose are practical keys to begin unlocking doors you might have thought locked forever. Feel the invitation. You don't have to carry everything alone. There are tools, practices, and communities that support this journey. When filming this section, soften your voice, take long breaths, and use images that convey warmth: a close-up of touching hands, a lit candle, a non-judgmental gaze. These elements help create the atmosphere of comfort and hope that the message calls for. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this topic. Continuing this journey requires paying attention to the small trials that arise daily and being honest in recording what works. As we move forward, we'll transform these guidelines into practical, guided exercises, with examples of language for forgiveness conversations, short scripts for 10-minute meditations, and templates for acts of service you can replicate. Before we go, leave a quick comment summarizing what you felt. Comment: "This resonates with me." If you've stuck with me this far, thank you. From the bottom of my heart, your presence already speaks volumes about your openness to healing and transformation. If this content brought you something new or touched your heart, consider subscribing to the channel. Here, I bring reflections, testimonies, and practical exercises designed for those who want to truly walk the path, not just listen to stories. Subscribing is a simple way to ensure these messages continue to reach you, with priority given to material that helps with daily decisions and your faith journey. If this video resonated with you, leave a comment saying "I'm with you until the end." I want to know who made it to the end and connect with those of you on this quest. Your comment helps create a real community, a place where we can share stories, small victories, and questions that arise along the way. And if you found some comfort or important insight, leave a like. It's a quick gesture that shows this conversation made a difference and helps me know what to bring to future productions. There's a video here that complements this topic with testimonies and guided prayers. Click and stay with me there to delve deeper into what we started today. It will be a practical space with real-life examples and short scripts for you to apply in the coming weeks. Thank you for following along. I will continue preparing content that supports your transformation and your mission.